Hi, this is Jurgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis vlog. Thought I would share a interesting case study with you. A client I saw a few weeks ago who flew in from Germany to work on a number of issues. The one of the issues I'd like to cover here is a very severe cat allergy that we worked on. And I'm going to share this case story with you because it contains a few lessons about how change and how change works in real life. And there's a few points that I would like to make illustrated through this particular case. So the client had a very severe cat allergy and would respond very strongly with symptoms from itching and sneezing and swelling whenever exposed to a cat. So an interesting thing was that this particular symptom developed as an adult, and the first time he experienced it was right after a very traumatic event. So right after a traumatic event, after then spending some time around a cat, he suddenly had a very severe allergy reaction that he had never had before. So this is a good sign in terms of change work, at least in theory, because A, it means that the person has a vast personal history of not responding with the allergic symptoms and really knows how to do it. And there's something that has reassociated cats with danger in his psychophysiological system recently. So that means that you can, in all likelihood, reverse that or reassociate that, or more accurately, help him reassociate it for himself. So the first thing we did, this guy had flown in for 5 days to work on a host of issues, all of them successful, which is good. But I always like to be a minimalist, meaning to do as little as possible to effect a particular change. So my thinking first was that if we could undo the traumatic event, meaning release the emotions from the memory, from the representation, then the associations made related to the allergy would likely also disappear. This has happened on several occasions in the past. So what I did was something called event havening. Now, havening is a psychosensory form of psychotherapy where you combine touch. You might touch the arms like this. You might touch the face as if you're washing it, or your hands. There are particular ways of touching that have very specific effects on the brain and the nervous system. So you're accessing the trauma or the memory, and then once you've opened the neural networks, for the next few minutes, those neural networks are going to be very sensitive or open to adaptation. So once you've done that, you combine a particular way of touching with distraction, with imagery that connects to various resources. And after a few rounds of that, you access the memory again to notice the change. Now, this is often a very nice way of clearing out trauma or specific traumatic experiences. So we did that with the memory. He was able to access it pretty strongly, I think around a 7 on a 1 to 10 scale of emotional intensity. Now, to my slight surprise, even though the event was cleared, nothing happened with the allergy. So then I attempted a very basic NLP allergy cure, which is Robert Dilts and also Susie Smith and Tim Halbam's old ways of working, where you're essentially using anchoring. So you find some representation that is similar to what they're allergic to. So, for example, in this case, dogs. He had no issues with dogs. And you have him access a representation of dogs. You anchor it. And then you hold that anchor and do your best to transfer it to a representation of cats. You know, closely watching the nonverbals to see if the nonverbal state is the same when you've finished. Now, the nonverbals weren't exactly a match, you know, but I had a hope that it would be enough to make a difference. So we were able to locate a cat, you know, neighbors where he worked who had a cat, who were very generous here in town. So he tested it, and no change. Or not a significant change, perhaps a little bit, but not a significant change. So that didn't work. I also emphasized John Sarno's framework, which is essentially that allergies and chronic pain are a sort of distractor from unconscious painful emotions. So the brain creates a distractor in pain or scratching or ringing in the ears or a migraine or a backache, if you will, or allergic symptoms, so that as long as the mind is fixated on that, we're completely in the dark of unconscious emotions that our minds have determined, you know, this shouldn't reach conscious awareness. This is a very effective model. John Sarno is probably the most successful pain doctor of our times, and he truly deserves a Nobel Prize in medicine for his results. So if you haven't checked out the work of John Sarno, please do. He's likely one of the best kept secrets that could really change humanity. You know, his lessons. So in my change work career, his findings have proved very, very valuable in helping people with pain and various symptoms. So I operated from a John Sarno type framework, which seemed to resonate, but it took some time for him to get it. So it was something of a work in progress. Now, combined with that, I did the thing that has been the most useful for me personally in terms of working with allergies, and that has been hypnotic regression work. So you essentially create a hypnotic state, or evoke one to be more accurate, and then you probe for the emotion behind the allergic symptoms. So you're getting the client's unconscious to evoke or activate the emotions behind the allergies, which often can be a surprise to the client's conscious mind. And then you use the emotion as an affect bridge back in time to whatever the mind creates as a first event, and you clear it. And you clear out the related memories that appear. This has, to me, been more successful than not successful. It's also, in my experience, been more successful than the traditional NLP oriented formats for allergies. But you better have both in your toolbox, because nothing's going to work all of the time. Remember that it's the clients who actually make the change. All we're doing is providing the weather, as Milton Erickson used to say. But different weather or different contexts or different ways of presenting information or different rituals will resonate more with some people than other people. So that's why you need to be very, very flexible. Now, fortunately, we were able to test the responses with the same cat every day, and after 2 solid sessions of regression work, nothing. no change whatsoever. And we had 2 days left. So what to do? That's a tough case. Where do you go from there? So what we did is that we ended up doing event havening on the allergic symptoms themselves. Now, as far as I know, I don't know anyone who's done that before. But what we would do is I would have him, and I combined this with a new code NLP format. So what we did is I had him see himself over there with the allergic symptoms from yesterday, the last time he tested. And I placed a piece of paper on the ground to use as a tactile and a spatial anchor. So I had him step into the image, the hallucinated image, and step onto the piece of paper on the floor to anchor the symptoms, the contextual triggers to that particular place. Then I had him re-experience the event from yesterday where he still responded very strongly, and no emotions came up, but his allergic symptoms came up to a 7. So from a 0, no allergic symptoms, to a 10, like a complete blast of it, he was at a 7. So then we did a couple of rounds of havening touch, distraction, imagery, and I think first we came down to a 4 and then down to a 2. And we couldn't get any further down than that. He was still at a 2. Then I had him step out and do what John Grinder calls, so this is full credit to John Grinder, a new code game. I'm not going to go into it in detail. If you want the specific step-by-step, you can buy John Grinder's book, Whispering in the Wind, if you're curious about new code NLP. You can also check out Provocative Hypnosis, which has several case stories using new code NLP. But we did a game called the Alphabet Game, which is designed to create a high-performance state. So you're combining reading and vocalizing letters with cross-lateral movements, rhythm. And the whole idea of the game is that they're supposed to be challenging enough, but not too challenging, so that the person ends up in a relatively content-free high-performance state, a flow state. Then, once the person was clearly, this particular client was clearly in a flow state, I had him reassociate into the context, meaning stepping back onto the paper. So the intent here is for the high-performance state to get linked unconsciously with the contextual triggers of the allergic response. Now, a key point here is to not attempt to consciously influence anything when the person re-enters the context. So you don't have the client attempt to consciously, imagine that they're doing okay or imagine that they have a different response. The whole clue is to generate the high-performance state and then have the person re-enter the context without any conscious attempt to manipulate anything. So we did this twice, and it completely seemed to blow the whole thing out. It just looked and sounded very different afterwards when we talked about the event. Now shit happened. So the next time when he stepped into the context, there was just a slight inkling of an allergic response this time, and he really tested it. Like he would sniff the cats and really be with it and spend a lot of time with it and really push the envelope. So this was a huge change. Now, something. So and then we did it one more time. So we came back to the office the final time, and we activated the inkling, just the inkling of having an allergic response. So I had him see himself over there again on a piece of paper with the allergic response. I had him step into the hallucinated image, and I had him have a felt sense of that inkling. So you need internet access. You need for the symptom to be activated to some extent. Had him step out one more time, and then I had him once again do an alphabet game. But this time I used a different chart. I had him do it backwards, and we created variations of the game because for it not to be memorable, you need for it to be challenging. Once again, we were able to create some very good high performance states or flow states, and we re-entered him back into the context, and profound stillness. He just spontaneously went into this state of profound stillness. So last day he tested, he just had this quick voice in his head that kind of said, are we still doing the allergy thing? And then it got replaced by this other voice that says, nah, screw it. And that was it. And since then, he has had, I've spoken to him on 2 occasions since then, with a few weeks in between. So he has had several opportunities to test this with various cats, and no allergic response. This is completely cleared, completely done. So very happy with that one, and I'm sharing this story to also make a couple of points. One is that for those of you who haven't looked into havening as a method, and those of you who haven't looked into New Code NLP, these are useful modalities. They are useful modalities to have as part of your toolbox. So if you're serious as an agent of change, they're well worth the investigation and the exploration. The other thing is, of course, the client is always the one who creates the change. So we're providing the context. But the changes also happen in a relationship where we are providing the context and providing certain input. And no way of working, no framework, nothing will resonate with everyone all the time. So you need different frameworks. You need a flexibility. You need to be able to not only change the quote-unquote techniques that you use, but you have to be willing to step into very different frameworks. So I'll give an example of this. This particular client had mentoring with a very famous 3 principles coach or mentor. Not naming any names. There's no purpose in doing that. But he's had several sessions with that particular mentor and studied the 3 principles. And as much as I really like that model and it has influenced my work, this guy still had the same type of issues. And he, of course, still was allergic despite that mentoring. So might very well be that some of my clients, if they had gone to that particular mentor, would have experienced, great changes that they never experienced with me. So I'm not attempting to elevate myself in position in relationship to a particular mentor out there. I'm just saying, for some of the people who have gone all into, for example, a 3 principles framework, the reality is that there are people, if you work as a coach or agent of change or a therapist, that just won't resonate with that, or that might not quite be the right framework to help that particular person with the particular symptoms that they're struggling with. So for example, the assumptions behind the three principles are very different than the framework that a havening professional, for example, a psychosensory form of therapy operates from. It's very different. It's also very different from the framework that a affect bridge hypnotherapist specialist would work from, or from a John Sarno perspective, or from a neurolinguistic programming perspective, or from a new code NLP perspective. These various fields have different underlying assumptions. They're different frameworks, meaning that there are certain things that are easily seen and easily done within that framework at the expense of other things. So that capacity or willingness to change framework, to change not only what you do, but the very way that you understand what you're doing is sometimes essential to be able to get some good changes. A final point that I want to make, and that is that actual live change work is a lot messier than a lot of seminar instructors and books and DVDs try to sell. So, for example, if you're a neurolinguistic programming student or a hypnotherapy student, the teachers at seminars need to demonstrate what they're teaching. So they're always looking for issues and people who process information in a way that's a really good functional fit with the particular format or technique that they're going to demonstrate. Now, this is wise. There are good reasons for doing that. Mainly, you have to actually demonstrate what you're demonstrating, and especially when you have new students, you don't want to complicate things too much. Now, of course, another part of this is it's very easy when you're scanning for clients or demo subjects that really fit your technique. It's easy to look good in front of the students, and it's easy to sell a notion that change work is often quicker and cleaner than it often may be in the real world, because if that's all the instructor is doing, and sadly, at least in my experience, I've hardly seen exceptions to this. Almost everybody seems to operate this way, the people who teach. What very often happens is that the student doesn't get any references for the teacher screwing up, or improvising, or troubleshooting, or doing once, or what they do once the technique or format or way of thinking that they're operating from doesn't quite resonate. That's what you really need in the real world. And when students don't see that, and they actually start seeing real clients, and real clients don't quite respond, they very often get frustrated, and they have no idea what to do. And this is partially the teacher's fault. This is partially the teacher's fault. And very often it's sold a notion of congruence. If you only were more congruent, if you only were better, or the instructor would be able to do it. And that's not necessarily so. I don't think it's lack of skills in hypnotic regression or in basic NLP that didn't help me at first succeed with this particular client. It's just that we needed to do something different. So don't take all your information from one source. That includes me, although I highly doubt that anyone is taking all their information exclusively from me. But anyone who tells you that their particular brand of psychology or philosophy or change work is all there is, and have discovered the one and only holy grail, is full of shit. That's just the truth. So if anything, be more eclectic and be willing to experiment, and don't take all your information from one source. Okay, hope this was useful.